Hello everyone, I'm Grandmaster Damian Lemos here for TheChessWorld.com. Welcome to a new course. This time we'll talk about the Reti opening for white. And the Reti arises after knight f3, d5, and here white goes g3. So the Reti resembles king's Indian attack because white clearly wants to castle kingside, and then in many lines we play d3. Now, depending on what black does, we might go d4 and c4. The Reti is a flexible system for white, and as you can probably imagine, the Reti being such a complex system, we could spend 100 hours talking about the Reti, and that probably wouldn't be enough. So the approach I'll choose for this course is I'll show you the model games I consider model games in the Reti. I'll show you my favorite games, and we'll choose a line against every line black can play. For instance, our analysis starts off with bishop g4. Black can play bishop f5. He can play on top of bishop f5, bishop g4. He can play with c6. Can play knight f6 and e6. There are lines where black plays g6. There's c5. There are many lines for black to consider. But there's one thing I like about the Reti, and that is there's no need to know a lot of theory. There's no need to memorize endless theoretical lines. Instead, if you know the plans, if you know the ideas behind the position we're playing, then it'll be much easier for you to play. And even if your opponent plays something you don't know, you can still find a way as white, so long as you know the ideas. So that's the approach we'll use for this course. So with that being said, let's get started. So the first game you'll find in the BGN files is Pankratov against Lobanov. And what I like about this game is not only the opening, but the middle game. From these games, we'll learn a lot chess-wise in general, not only the opening. So here, knight f3, black goes d5, play g3. So now we officially got Reti. So let's see the bishop g4 system. So black, when he goes to bishop g4, he's trying to play in a Slav version, because if you think about it, most of Slav players would go c6, e6. They would just play super solid, and the idea is to get this bishop out of the pawn chain before playing e6. Imagine black playing all of these moves and then having a bishop on c8. It wouldn't be great for him to be stuck with the bishop inside the pawn chain. So with black, what he wants to do is he wants to get the bishop out, and in many lines he'll trade it off on f3, because that's part of black's strategy. So after bishop g4, we play bishop g2. In this game, black goes knight to d7. So here's where we can see how flexible the Reti is. Black could simply stick to an easy to play system like c6 and e6, but after knight d7, he might play e5 as well. So here's where we see how flexible the Reti is. We could play d4, and then we get just a different structure, but we do stop e5. We could play c4, because by playing c4, we're also stopping black from playing e5. We could just castle and let black play e5, or we can play h3, which is the move we'll analyze in this game. So h3 is simple and clear. We target black's bishop on g4. We ask the question to that bishop, does he want to play bishop h5? Does he want to take on f3? In this game, black goes for bishop to h5. Of course, we'll also see a game where black takes on f3, but as a heads up, let me tell you that this is already better for white, for a simple reason. Black, he must play c6, e6, he'll get a solid position. I'm not saying we're winning, but we start off with slight advantage right off the bat because we've got the bishop pair and we know how powerful, how big of an advantage the bishop pair is, especially in open positions. Here we'll simply move our bishop back, then depending on what black does, we can play d3 and e4, or maybe c4. We'll have a lot of ways to play as white, and we're guaranteed um, stable advantage because of the fact we've got two bishops, he's got one. So that's something that's worth knowing here. So after h3, I would say it's better for black to play bishop h5. Maybe better, it's not the right word. I think it's in practice, it gives black more chances of getting something out of the opening. And by the way, bishop f5, it's probably a mistake because the whole point of this line is to get the bishop to h5 or to take on f3. Here, if he goes bishop f5, we can create a lot of targets in the center and queenside already playing c4, then knight d4 might be an option, so is knight h4, pawn on b7 is hanging, so clearly black has two moves here, taking on f3 or bishop h5. So let's see bishop h5. Alright, so here, again, the red is super flexible. You can consider c4, you can castle, which is the move we'll analyze. I've seen games where white plays d3 first, and the idea here would be to play g4 and knight h4, just to illustrate the point. Let's say instead of d3 or castles, let's say I go g4 right away, then he goes bishop g6. If I try this plan, which wants to get the bishop pair, then black has bishop e4. So we're not really getting the bishop pair yet. And of course, there's no way we're playing f3 here. We're just creating too many weaknesses, not to mention he might have tricks on h4. So that's why after h3, bishop h5, if we go d3, now we do have e4 under control. So that means g4 and knight h4 might be an idea worth playing. So here, for instance, after c6, g4, here, knight h4. This is a line I don't like it here for white, particularly. I think black can simply play e5, but it's worth noting that we've got plans based on g4 and knight h4. Here, don't get me wrong, this is playable for both sides, maybe with some deep research, it might be even better for white. So all I'm saying is this is a plan that you have to remember because it might happen. You might get the opportunity to play it in your games in this position or in similar positions as well. So now, after bishop h5, let's see what happened in the game Pankratov against Lovanov. So white castles. So now we're waiting to see what black's gonna do. We're not concerned about him taking on f3 because could have done it and move back. So here, after white castles, we see black playing e6 in this game. Now if he goes e5, I believe e5 is it's not a mistake because black is not losing, but I think it's a step in the wrong direction because we got this powerful diagonal, and now I would simply play c4. So what is black gonna do here? If he goes e4, I think his position is just collapsing. We can play knight e1, and he's got no development. We'll easily attack those pawns. His center is falling apart, so this is already a clear advantage for white. So after c4, what else? If you go c6, there are other issues here. We can take, and the addition of c4, c6 taking on d5, and c takes d5 by black helps us big time, because now black won't be able to play c6 to counter our bishop on g2. So here there are many lines that give white a clear advantage. d4 happens to be the best, because we essentially destroy black's center. If he takes on d4, then he'll have an isolated pawn on d5. That's terrible. If he takes on f3, it's interesting to see that here. Bishop takes is the natural recapture from white, but pawn takes gives us a decisive advantage already, because we'll take on e5, we'll play f4, just have crushing attack right off the bat, and he's got the king on e8. So I'm not shocked to see this is already +3 for white. So after d4, I guess e4 is the only move black can think of here. But after knight h4, then knight f5 is on the table for white. Maybe f3 in some lines. As black, I would be concerned about knight c3 and queen b3. Again, it's just too much for black to handle, and that bishop on h5 feels in limbo. It's on the wrong square. So just to see a sample line here, knight f6, then we could play the engine likes a4, which is not easy to see at first glance. The idea is to play a5, and then he won't have knight b6 by the time we play queen b3 and knight c3, so of course a4 is a powerful move. I would be inclined to play f3 for a simple reason. It's easier to understand. It's a human move, and black is lacking counterplay here. If he goes bishop d6, we can always play knight f5, and the minute he cannot even play bishop b8 because g7 is hanging. Oof. Has to play bishop f8 again. Alright, so this, needless to say, this is winning for white, which has got too much space, powerful attack, and the fact he has to come back to f8 says it all. So maybe after f3, maybe taken on f3. Now, there are other issues for for black, is that we'll push our pawns, and that bishop might be trapped as well. So let's see what the best line is according to the engines. So bishop g6, now it says g4. I would go bishop e7 as black, no questions asked. Bishop e7 and castle, that king on e8 is in terrible shape. So here, this, we don't even have to bother taking that pawn and allow black unnecessary counterplay. We'll just continue with our kingside operation, and so much space. It's a clear advantage for white if black plays like an engine. So imagine how easily our opponents could collapse here after facing all this pressure. It might be a winning advantage because black is not going to play like an engine. So here we get to see some early opening tricks by white, and that's why you'll see that in most lines here after 97. So we go h3, bishop h5, castles. You'll see that black sticks to c6 and e6. Black, especially in the opening, doesn't have to be ambitious. Depending on the line, but here it's better to just play solid e6, c6, castle kingside as soon as possible, and then later on when he's got a good development, then he'll go for e5. But here, I think playing solid chess is better, and that's why e5 is not likely to work. So black goes e6. Here's where white has to choose a setup. We've got many ways to play this. We could transpose into a Catalan structure, playing d4. Now, I'm a big fan of playing with the pawn on d3 because I like control, I like having control over the e4 square. So that's why d3 is the move we'll take a look at, and also because in this game we'll see a lot of great plans. It's not just because I like it, of course. There's other ways to play, like c4, maybe a double fianchetto, some specific cases. Now, let's focus on d3. So after d3, black plays knight to f6, and here, this didn't happen in this game, but this is worth noting. There is an interesting move for white to consider. There are many lines where we want to play e4. Of course, e4 here is not even possible because he's got two pieces controlling that square. And you would think about rook e1. Now, rook e1 is not very good because we might need that rook on the f file. If you think about it, maybe he can play something like bishop c5. Oops, sorry about that arrow. And it doesn't feel right. Not to mention that by the time we play e4, we might run into some tricks and maybe we end up losing that pawn. So, as a rule of thumb, when we want to play e4 in the Reti, in most cases, the move we're looking at is not rook e1 but queen e1. Now, queen e1 is a move, is a concept we need to understand, we need to remember, because by playing queen e1, e4 might be a threat. Second, we get the queen out of this diagonal, so black essentially has no tricks, and we get to keep some pieces on board. The other benefit to playing queen e1 is that in similar lines, we avoid a queen trade after playing e4. So I think the best example to show this would be here. Let's say we go e6. This didn't happen in the game, but I'll show you here. I'm just making this line up. It is theory, by the way. So bishop g2, let's say black goes knight f6 first. Let's say we go h3, fine, bishop here, castles, e6, d3, and bishop e7. So this is similar to the line we analyzed in the game. Only difference is that here, queens are, let's say, facing each other. So we have to be careful. Now, if we go rook e1, castles, e4, this loses a pawn. This shows why rook e1 is a mistake, because here black simply takes, and we're just down a pawn, we've got no compensation, so clearly this is not going to happen. Now, if we play queen e1 instead, then e4 is possible. This is not the only plan for white, but if we want to go for e4, then queen e1 is the way to go. Because now there are no tricks. If he takes, fine. We're not losing a pawn. He's got no tricks on this diagonal. And later on, we can even get kingside attack. Of course, this is early opening, so that's a lot of concepts, a lot of ideas we should analyze in positions where white plays queen e1. But I just pointing this out in case we don't get a similar position later. I'm sure we will, but I think it's a good concept, and I'll just mention it now. So, okay, let's come back to the game. As you can see, there are many move orders as well, so that's what makes the Reti So complex. So knight e7, right, h3. I like, against bishop g4, I like asking the question early on. So bishop h5, castles. So black plays e6, white goes d3, and after knight gf6, here we see white going for another setup, which is c4. Now, I'll explain what's the idea. After c4, I'll mention the key concepts, and then we'll finish our analysis. In the next chapter, we'll see what happened in this middle game. So, after c4, what white's trying to do here is, since we know black's cards already, in other words, we know the line he played, bishop g4 and bishop h5, we can adapt to it and play something like c4 to create imbalances. After all, in the opening, we are trying to get an advantage as white, and if we can create imbalances, then all the better. Because we've got the first mover advantage, he's still got the king in the center. I mean, he'll castle in good time. He's still 2-3 moves away from it. So in the meantime, we can try creating some action. So after c4, black has to be careful here. c6 is one of the moves, of course. In the game, we see black playing bishop e7, and after bishop e7, something interesting happens. We take on d5, and now regardless of how he retakes, if he takes with a knight, then we'll eventually have a strong center, so he's likely to take with a pawn. Now, if we look at the pawn structure, it's not symmetrical anymore. We do have an extra pawn on the king side, and that's something we'll use to our benefit. So we'll see more of this on the next chapter, but here we see the first imbalance. Now, black could take on c4. Okay, here we take, and now this diagonal opens up, so black has to be careful because we might have g4 and knight h4. Now, if black plays c6, then position and pawn structure still looks symmetrical, but it's fair to say we've got more space, and here, this is just a sample line, you'll find it in the analysis, where white is better. I mean, we've got more space, we can relocate our queen to e2 if necessary. Later on in the game, we can go after his bishop, and we'll have a position with more space, bishop pair, and these are the advantages we're looking for when we play the Reti, because it all starts with a micro advantage for white. Then as the game goes on, the bishop pair becomes stronger, our space advantage becomes more relevant. So this is, I would say, and I'm saying this as a d4 player, it is a dream for white to get those advantages, because you get an advantage and your opponent, on the other hand, doesn't get much in return. Has a solid position, but that's all he's got. We are on the attacking side, he's on the passive side. So after c4, black could also play c6. That's probably his best try here. And then, once we take, if he takes with the e6 pawn, then same concept applies. We get an extra pawn on the king side for white. We could eventually get a lot of space there. Black, of course, he gets an extra pawn on the queen side. That could be relevant in endgames. So that's one line. And if he takes with the c6 pawn, then the queen side opens up. So we might get other ideas to explore as white. So that's essentially what white is trying to do after playing c4. We're trying to create imbalances, and we're doing so because we know the line he's playing. Of course, if he played the London system with bishop f5, we might still play with c4, we might play queen e1 and e4. So this is what I like about the Reti. We'll choose the line we'll play depending on what black does. And we've got many lines to choose from, and we'll find a good plan for white against all of the lines black can play. So that's hopefully what I'll show you in this course. So with this, I'll finish the intro. Hope you found it useful. Hope you could learn something. Of course, I want to see you guys on the next one. Thank you.